Good morning. Thank you all for coming out today. I have the honor of introducing you all to Genevieve Clayton, who's with Positive Energy. And Genevieve is going to be talking a lot about some of the changes in solar, kind of the opportunities on the residential side, opportunities for this church. But also, feel free to ask any questions, kind of jump in. I think the presentation will be really interactive. Of course, this is part of our bigger Earth Summer series. We're looking at everything from climate and environmental justice to energy and how to deal with kind of renewable energy and what are the opportunities and challenges around that. And of course, it's really good to have Positive Energy Solar. They're a really good community partner. How I met, one of the owners, Christopher, he was part of a group that actually came here to First Presbyterian Church as part of business leaders in support of the Caja del Rio. And so I was sitting there with a group of business leaders, of all kinds, right? Insurance companies and the chambers of commerce. And Christopher from Positive Energy was one of the people that came to that meeting to meet with Senator Heinrichstadt. And him and I started talking about solar and the opportunities around this church. And he started talking to me about San Miguel Chapel and how they're putting solar on the oldest church in the city of Santa Fe. And I'm like, well, they should do it at San Miguel Chapel. There's a huge opportunity here at our church. And of course, that fits into our larger energy audit, right? We're obviously trying to reduce our footprint, put in more LEDs, be more energy efficient with our HVAC system and things like that. But then, of course, there's opportunities to maybe move towards renewables. And that would be good stewardship, not just of the environment, but of course, of our financial resources too. So with that said, I'm just really grateful for Genevieve taking time out of her Sunday morning to come here. I know a lot of you also are interested in residential solar on your houses or adding more solar to your house. And also, things around electric vehicles, tax credits. I think she can cover all of that as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I think it's wonderful, again, what you're doing and what everyone here is doing and the impact that you are wanting to achieve. That's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
So yes, my name is Genevieve. I'm with Positive Energy Solar. I can change this slide. I've been with the company for 3 years. I've been in Santa Fe for 5 years. I came here from Flagstaff, so I've kind of been around the Southwest a lot. So really happy with the involvement that I have with the community. This company allows me to be involved with community partners and speak and educate. And it's just a really great values-based company that's aligned with what I'm really wanting to achieve in my career. So that's kind of why I chose to work with them. Just like Andrew said, we're going to go over a little bit about who we are as a company, but more so just kind of educating you on the benefits of solar, the tax credits, how do you go solar in terms of sizing a system, what it means to interconnect to the grid, all those things. And this is very interactive, just like he said. So if you do have questions that come up, feel free to stop me so we can discuss it in a moment. And we can also have time at the end for Q&A. So Positive Energy Solar, has anybody heard of us? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We're very proud to say that we were just actually nominated for 14 years in a row Best of Santa Fe for a solar installer. So that's something we're really proud of. We started 26 years ago as a business within the Santa Fe incubator. And since then we've grown into Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Total, I think we have close to 120 employees and maybe around 80 or so of those are employee owners, as I am as well. We're a B Corp, which is something that if you're not familiar with a B Corp, it's somebody who has a certification that shows that you have a responsibility to the people, the planet, and prosperity. So it's like a triple bottom line. We're local, as I said, and we've done probably closer to, I know this says 3,500, but it's probably almost 6,000 maybe or so in the state of New Mexico between here and Albuquerque.
Did you work any farther north to go to Taos, or you mostly just Santa Fe?
We do. Well, Taos, it depends on the utility provider. P&M is the biggest utility provider in this area, but we do work with the Jemez utility provider. Kit Carson is a little different, but we'll go within 2 hours of Santa Fe. So why do we want to go solar? Obviously, there's a lot of reasons, but the biggest thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is just the amount of free energy that's coming from the sun. in 1 hour, the sun can produce, I think it's 173 terawatt hours of electricity. That's in 1 hour, and the entire annual usage of all of humanity in 2022 was 161,000. So 1 hour produces more electricity than we need as an entire human race, which is incredible. So we want to take advantage of that, right? It's especially here in New Mexico. I mean, we have over 300 days a year with sunshine. We have mild season changes. We don't have a huge like snowpack that comes in the winter and stays all year. We have a really good opportunity to produce a lot of electricity with the amount of sunshine that we have. So as you can see here, out of the whole country, Arizona and New Mexico have the best availability, you would say. And what that means to us here in New Mexico is it means that you can install solar and not have to put as much on your roof as somebody who maybe lives in New York or in that has less access. So it's a good opportunity for us in New Mexico. So in addition to the lower energy costs, obviously with going solar, you're offsetting your electrical bill. But there's energy security. What that means is distributed generation, which is something where we have solar that goes on our homes, and anytime that we don't use all of it, it's going to go to our neighbors, it's going to go back to the grid. So that's less energy being pulled from San Juan that your neighbor's using. So you can essentially strengthen the grid by installing solar residentially because you have more electricity being generated at a local level. In addition to that, obviously there's the environmental impacts that it has, which are incredible. We're banking on the sun shining, and that's really all we need. So the locality of it, the jobs that are created. I don't know if anybody's heard in the news lately that there's a new manufacturing facility that's going to be put just outside of Albuquerque that's creating like 1,800 jobs, and it's really great for the economy here in New Mexico.
Yay.
Yay.
What's PNM's current source of energy? They're not using a lot of solar. What are they? Coal, oil, gas?
San Juan coal is a big one. There's a lot of talk about community solar projects that will help offset. They do have a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2045. So I think there are a lot of things that are being put into motion on a large scale to help offset the use from the San Juan plant. It just hasn't quite happened yet. Good question. Okay, tax credits. So the residential side of things, which is primarily what I'm going to be talking about, is the residential side of things. There's 2 tax credits that you can get to help offset the cost of going solar. The first is a 30% federal tax credit, and that goes towards the tax liability that you have on the federal side, and it's for the year that the system is installed. So 30% of the total cost of your solar system. Let's say that your electrical needs to be upgraded in order to go solar. Well, the federal tax credit can also offset that cost. So it's a cost necessary to go solar. So 30% is great. There's no limit. It doesn't get capped. So let's say that you don't use the full tax credit in the first year that you install the system, it'll continue to roll forward. So this tax credit was part of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year in 2022. It keeps 30% tax credits for solar for the next 10 years. So there's an incredible amount of opportunity for people to install solar and save up to 30% from the federal. The state has a different one, it's 10%, and that goes towards your state tax liability, of course. That won't roll forward, but they will give you a check for the difference if you don't use the full credit the first year that the system is installed. That's new this year. So that was some legislation a couple years ago in 2021 that passed. So this will also be good for the next 9 years. So The state has a budget of 12 million a year. It used to be 8 million. So there's a lot of movement that is just really focused on making sure that people who are wanting to go solar have the opportunity and have the opportunity to save a lot of money when they do it. Yes.
I just wanted, I did already go solar.
Yeah.
A word to the wise. My credit from the feds was only 26% because I did this earlier, a year and a half ago. But, and the state was 10%. I got my federal rebate right away, within 10 days of filing my taxes in February. The state, however, a word to the wise, took 4 months. And I called them and I said, why haven't I gotten my credit? And they said, oh, well, this is suspicious because last year you owed the state and this year you're getting a refund. So that's very suspicious.
Yeah, the state, yeah, definitely speak to a tax person about how it'll impact yours. But with the state, there's an application. We actually, as a company, will fill it out for you because it's really complex and detail oriented, and it's definitely easier for us to help take care of that for you. So with the state, you may have also heard or seen some articles about people who didn't get the state tax credit for the year that they installed the solar. And a lot of that's because with this budget, the state wants you to apply in advance. So because of the reason taking so long, but also because of this budget, we would want your application to be in the same year or as soon as possible once your system's installed. So that is a very good point. It takes some time and will help kind of.
And my solar company did help me fill out all that complicated stuff. Everything was submitted perfectly in February, but I didn't get my credit until May, the end of May.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated, but definitely I'm glad you got it. A lot of companies out there don't help fill out that application. There's a lot of people missing out on that opportunity.
I'm into words. Solar panel installation. Does that not also include the cost of the panels?
It does. It does include the cost of the panels. It includes the cost of the permitting, the microinverters that we'll talk about a little bit. It includes the cost of any electrical upgrades that are required. Anything that you have to pay to go solar is included in that federal tax credit.
Yeah, I don't like installation. It doesn't convey what you do.
Okay.
We just had a friend of ours put solar on their house, so the total cost was like 22,000, but they ended up after all the tax credits only paying 6,000. And it was a massive savings. Really worth their time, right? And now they have no energy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. So, yeah.
Would this apply for new construction where the builder is responsible for the installation of solar to satisfy the green building requirements?
That's a good question. So it depends on a few things. The main thing with new construction is it's going to depend on how it's purchased. And if it's financed through a home loan, then it may not qualify because it's considered a part of the whole new construction. If it's separate, if the general contractor initiates the solar, but it's completely separately contracted, like through a company like us, then the homeowner should still get the credit, as long as the homeowner is paying for the solar system.
Okay, so if the contractor is paying for the installation, it would not apply.
I don't know for certain, but if it's being paid for through the full cost of the new construction, then it would make me assume not. So more often than not, when we install solar for new constructions, it's a separate contract from the new construction build expenses and everything. That helps it stay.
Well, this may be getting into the issue in the development project, but so this was a way to meet the green build requirement, was including solar. The contractor has a contract with, I don't know, your company or somebody else. And so and because the installation companies, as you know, they're backed up. And the county and the city accepts the contract as satisfying the green build
Mhm.
requirement,
Mhm.
okay, but they're not. There's a backlog of installation projects,
Mhm.
so I don't know how to. I don't know how to get an answer to that particular question.
Yeah, I think that it depends on the situation in terms of who's paying, obviously, but also who's applying for the tax credits. Because if the builder is the person that purchased it and it's part of the larger home loan, then it would probably be a little different than the regular.
Yeah, there's no home loan involved,
Mhm. Okay,
and it's purchased by the builder.
yeah, that's a good question. Let me make a note of that and see if I can find a better answer.
Because I think there's a lot of potential, because builders have an option, they have to decide through the consultant how to meet the green build requirements
Mhm.
for new construction.
Mhm.
And it's a menu of things, as you know, to get there, which could include solar.
Yeah.
So if you could tell the builders that they can use this credit somehow, it would incentivize builders in Santa Fe to pursue it.
I know
Yeah.
somebody who did build a house with solar. But there was no loan involved, but she is getting the solar credits. Yeah,
So
she is
she's
getting it.
Mhm. So if she's paying for it and it's
Mhm.
being installed, then she should qualify as a homeowner. There may be situations that are a little more tricky, but as we say, you know, in our industry, we want to make sure that we're solar professionals and not tax professionals. So they should always talk to their tax person, but there's a lot of complications around who pays and if it's a new home, what happens, and if it's required, some HOAs require solar. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it. I haven't seen a new construction where the homeowner did not get the credit. But that's a good question. So let me definitely.
And the distinction in this situation is that the builders paying for it.
But so this credit would not necessarily go to the builder if they don't own the home. So
Okay.
the homeowner is the person.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to divide your paperwork and have your builder bill you separately for that.
Yeah.
It can be the same person.
Yeah,
But it's a separate contract.
Absolutely right.
Part of your house that's gas into electric. And so does this type of tax credit cover that kind of conversion?
Great question as well. So this tax credit is specifically for solar and electrical upgrades. So if you are wanting to go from gas to electric or heating and cooling, for example, or for a water heater, there are separate tax credits for that are through the Inflation Reduction Act. I believe it's up to $4,000. It might be a rebate, which is more of a direct payment back to the homeowner. Again, there's a lot of verbiage in there that we're not privy to as a solar company. We don't know exactly how the HVAC tax credits work, but I know that there are options. Just as Andrea had mentioned as well, there's electric vehicle tax credits that you can get for purchasing an electric vehicle that's manufactured in the United States. There's rebates for electrical upgrades aside from the solar as well, if you need to have that done, even if you're not going solar. So there's a lot of benefits within the IRA. And I do want to make a note on that the IRA is, it's passed with our latest administration. There is a risk that even though it's allowed for the next 10 years, that any future administrations could potentially revoke it. So definitely, if these are things that you're wanting to do and take advantage of, I would recommend doing it sooner than later because of that potential risk.
Yeah, and if you go to the church's Facebook page, and Gail's gonna put this up on the website, there was a great Wall Street Journal article on all these different credits. And so there's credits for, updating your electrical box. There's credits for, going from gas, heating and or drying, to electric. And there's all kinds of credits with HVAC. And so that article kind of highlights all the different ones from solar to electric vehicles to these kind of home updates, windows, updating windows and insulation is in there. And so there's credits for all of those different things. And so that article is really good. And I'll make sure we send that to you all to take advantage of it. I highly recommend taking advantage of all those things.
Any other questions on tax credit?
Worth it though. You'll save a lot of money with these credits, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. Okay, so when you go solar, there's a lot of things around, well, how does it work? How does it connect to the grid? How do we know how much to install? How do we know how much electricity we use? Things like that. So this is kind of where we'll get into that. And really the first thing that we want to understand is how the sun produces electricity that our home then can use. So with grid tied solar, grid tied meaning you're connected to the grid, you're connected to the utility. Essentially, when you install the solar panels on your roof or on the ground, the sun will hit them and then excite the electrons and create DC electricity. There's a second part of that where the DC electricity needs to be turned into AC electricity so our homes can use it. So we have an inverter that does that. So the inverter will change it to AC and then go to the home, and whatever is not being used by the home needs to go somewhere. So it'll go back to the grid. So this is how it works with grid type solar. Batteries can be incorporated because sometimes maybe the grid goes out. They're not necessarily required in any way to have the solar work for you and for your home, but it can provide that peace of mind for that security in the event of a grid outage. But essentially, with grid tied solar, you're using the grid as a battery in a way, because you have periods of time like at night or in the winter when you're not able to produce everything that you need. So the grid can kind of be the backup for you at that point. So we design systems to incorporate as much solar as possible while making sure that we're finding that right balance with a good payback and not necessarily having to rely too much on the grid.
Right, is the grid crediting you for the electricity you're providing to the grid?
Yes. So we'll go into that. I think it's the next couple of slides. It's called net metering. So it's an agreement that you have with the utility where you say, I'm giving you electricity for free from my solar system, and they're going to give you credit for that production. So with PNM in particular, one thing that we definitely want to recognize is the more electricity you use, the more it's going to cost, of course. So this just kind of highlights what that difference is. The more electricity you use, you can see we have blocked pricing with PNM. When you use over 900 kilowatt hours, you're paying almost 15 cents per kilowatt hour versus block one, which is 7 cents or close to 8 cents. So this is a good reason, in addition to the environmental impacts and the long-term impacts. Just in the short term, obviously solar can save you a lot of money if you have a pretty high usage. And then just to make a quick note, no matter what, as a PNM customer, you do have to have a connection fee. So when you go solar, if everything's offset by 100%, you're still going to have an $8 a month bill to be a customer. Yeah, but $8 versus $100 a month is pretty good.
Do they do that same price increase on I would assume on commercial too, right?
Yes.
I think that's what's getting this church a little bit is we'll have heavy uses and then we're up into that next block and our energy bill will really skyrocket.
Yeah, definitely. So with commercial rates, this is going to be dependent on, I don't think you can see kind of in the top right that it says rate 1A. Nonprofits, commercial properties, churches are going to have different rate codes. So they're going to have different rules when it comes to billing and the way that net metering incorporates with the church or the nonprofit. But essentially, yes, it's still going to have block price.
Super simple to know.
Yeah, definitely. So how do we size a system for your home? How do we make sure that we're going into your home and installing enough to accurately offset the bulk of your electric needs, if not all of your electric needs over the course of the year? Well, if you've seen your PNM bill, there's a graph on the front of the PNM bill that has some bars, and that shows us your historical data in the home. This is how much electricity you use every month. So here in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, that's the primary information that we use to understand your home's needs and your needs. If there's anything that's gonna change about that, if you're adding an electric vehicle later, if you're going from gas to electric, heating and cooling, if you're adding a water heater, all of these things will change the electric demand of your home, so we want to make sure to account for that. So we'll always ask homeowners if there are changes coming on and see if there's something we can do to work out what those could be and what it means for additional solar. So part of the consultation process is to determine what the future needs are, not just what you need right now.
That can be helpful if you all update your box, right? You may not have enough, spaces in your box. You wanted to add like a hot tub or electrical. And so as part of the solar process, you can update the box and there's tax credit for that. So and that'll help with, if you ever sell your home, it's good to have an updated box and have
Yes.
spaces. So
Yes.
Is that just this year or was it?
as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, that tax credit. So just.
I just did this last year.
Yeah, it just started this year.
And it's gonna go for another.
I'll
10
have to
years.
see it.
Yeah, check on that, but yeah, it's, that's something that can save you a lot of money because those updates can be, a couple grand to update your box, but it'll add value to your home. and create space. Yeah,
$7,000, $7,000.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's the kind of common number, which is where this extra 30% and 10%, so 40% that you can get back for that if you incorporate solar. Aside from it, if you're not ready to go solar, but you still need to do these electrical upgrades, just like you were asking, there are rebates and question credits that you can get outside of solar within the Inflation Reduction.
is New Mexico, so in Colorado, they're doing something kind of funky and it's interesting new technology. They're putting basically connecting to the outside of your box, like a cap that then doesn't require any space in your box. Where they tap into the outside of your electric box?
Yeah.
And are they doing that here in New Mexico?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a state thing. It's an electrical thing where if you don't have the space in your panel, just like you were talking about, if we were running to add more breakers, but there's not enough space in the panel, one way we can interconnect is called a line tap, where you kind of feed in through the top. So it's an option for some homeowners. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
it is cool. Yeah. So yeah, so when we size the system, we want to make sure that we're looking at what you need now and in the future, not just what you. And some of the newer technology that we have allows us to not only have more efficiency when it comes to installing panels, but it allows us to use different spaces and different types of installations that didn't necessarily, they weren't necessarily around 10 years ago. A lot of that is because of microinverters, the efficiency of the panels, the racking that allows us to put it on different types of roofs, like flat roofs, which we'll get into. But ultimately, all of that kind of plays into how we size a system, as well as the orientation. So ideally, we want a home's roof facing south, because that's going to give us the best production over the course of the year. We want to measure the shade from the trees or from the chimneys or any obstructions that might be on the roof. We take into account the pitch of the roof and the slope of the roof. We want to make sure that when we are installing on this, the structural integrity is going to be sufficient to install the solar. So we look into the best placement in that sense. And also, if there's any code issues, so we want to make sure there's space on the roof for firefighters to walk around or for HVAC companies to access their equipment. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into where the panels will go on your home, but ultimately we look at what's going to give us the most production and the best efficiency and look the best. So with that said, when we look at the production over the course of a year, just like we had seen in this slide, you can see that your electrical usage is going to vary through the year. So the same goes with the production. So the summer, the sun's higher in the sky, the days are longer. In the winter, the sun is lower in the sky, the days are shorter. So based off of all of those factors that we just spoke about, we're going to be able to determine how much electricity the system's going to produce over the course of the year, knowing the sun's higher right now in August than it is in December. The time of day and the cloud coverage, all of these factors that go into determining how much sun excess or radiation is the word for it, when you have a certain amount of sun access in a certain location. So there's a lot of things that go into determining how much solar you need and how well it can be placed. Okay, so net metering, we talked a little bit about that. This is where it comes into play. So when we look at when we talk about how much electricity your home is going to need over the course of a year, we want to account for net metering. So is anybody familiar with net metering? Perfect. So essentially what it means, when you give more to the grid than what you need, you're going to bank that credit. So if you produce more than you need, like today, August 13th, it's sunny, the sun is higher in the sky, the days are longer. You can see here, based off of this chart, the orange is the solar production. You can see August has pretty high production. So based off of that, maybe not in this graph, you can see that maybe later in the year, in the winter, you're going to have times when the sun is lower and the days are shorter, so it's producing less. So with these credits, so if you produce more than you need, the credits will be banked with P&M, and you can apply that later in the year. Yes, ma'am.
What if you always produce more than you needed?
Good question. If you always produce more than you needed, if you're anticipating growth in the future, like an electric vehicle, you install more solar than you need right now, those credits will continue to bank and roll forward. They're not going to expire.
But what if you don't do any of that? Like, what if you just buy, like, our home is very tiny, and we would do this, and our bills are very tiny. We would do this because it's the right thing to do.
So if you're producing more than you need on a regular basis, it kind of plays into that distributed generation where you're giving electricity to your neighbors instead of having them pull from the same one. So it strengthens the grid. Financially, it may not be as good of a payback as it could be for some homes that are larger, but you are helping offset this.
So you never get cash out.
Yes, you can.
Not
When you eventually sell your home and stop, cut out your P&M account, then they will give you cash. When you leave your P&M account and you've still got all this credit, then they'll give you a check.
that is an older rule that can happen for homeowners that have certain interconnection agreement rules, but in the present moment, they don't allow that anymore. So if you sell your home and you went solar this year and you sell your home next year, any credits that you have would just expire. They would have to go.
They told me a year ago that they would send me a check.
That's different than my understanding. Maybe they changed, but I know that they did have that rule previously, just not.
Well, previously they used to pay people monthly.
Mhm.
Or anytime you got over $20 worth of credit, they would send you a check.
Mhm.
But now they only do the credit thing where I've got tons of credit. I never go over my amount of credit because I don't use very much electricity either. But they told, when I called and asked them what happens with all this credit when I leave my home and disconnect my P&M, they said they would send me a check. That was about a year ago. They told me that.
That's great. That's different than my understanding, but definitely want to check on that because that is a good opportunity to make sure that you're not necessarily losing out on that overproduction. But they won't expire until you sell the house, until you change something about your P&M account. In the past, they did something that's called net billing. So net billing and net metering are different because they look at each month with net billing versus net metering. You look at the course of the year. So net billing, if you produce more than you need in June, they'll send you a check for the overproduction. Of course, they're going to pay you less than what they charge you. So then later in the year, maybe in December, you're producing less than what you need and you'll continue to have a bill. So it's a little bit better of a deal because with net metering, you have a one-to-one credit exchange and you can continue to roll forward. If you don't use it in November, you can use it in December.
Okay, the thing I noticed after we got our solar panels installed, I was curious how they credited you with your usage of what you put back in the system.
Mhm.
So I was standing out by the electric meter. Normally, if you're using more from P&M, then you're putting in the wheel in your electric meter, turn left to right. But if you produce more from your panel, then it starts moving back from right to left. And then the amount of electricity used, that meter goes down. I mean, it's fascinating thing to watch, you know, because you normally sit there and see it go left, right, like this. And then to see it go from right to left. And the
Spins backwards.
meter goes back down. I mean, that gives you a pretty good feeling that the system is working for you. So I just thought it's.
Used to get sunburned though, because we had to wait out there for so long to watch. The sun was doing.
I have a question about battery. So when I installed mine, I didn't install a battery, and then we had an outage for a prolonged period of time. So I looked into batteries, and I was told by your company that installed my service that if I installed a battery, I would lose net metering.
Yes,
So would you please explain that to everyone, because the Powell's company, your competitor, says that's not accurate. It depends on what battery you put in.
it does depend on what battery you put in. So the way that P&M looks at a system size, they measure the system size based off of the inverter capacity on the AC side. So once the electricity has gone through the inverter, this is how much, how big of a system you have. And net metering is allowed for systems up to 10 kilowatts. So the reason that it could take you out of net metering is because batteries have inverters in them as well. So P&M now recognizes the capacity of the solar and the inverter capacity of the battery. So if you have a 5 kilowatt solar system and a 5 kilowatt battery inverter, they say you have 10 kilowatts. So if you go over that, it changes the type of billing to that net billing. It depends on the type of battery, because there are some batteries that don't have an inverter in them. They're DC coupled, what it's called. And DC coupled batteries essentially bypass that rule because they're not changing into AC electricity. So there's an opportunity, and this is brand new actually as of the last couple of weeks. There's an opportunity to install a battery with a particular type of solar system that has the inverter that's called a string inverter. And that allows you to install up to 10 kilowatts and a battery and keep that metering. So it does depend on the type of battery. We haven't installed them much until the last month or so. So it's brand new, but yeah, it's a little tricky with P&M and the batteries that historically we've installed. That's the problem.
Could you make any comments about people who have electric vehicles and are using their electric vehicle battery as their storage?
That's a new technology as well. The Ford Lightning is, I think, the only one that can do it at this point. And it's called bidirectional charging. There's a tremendous amount of equipment that goes into installing those. So it's really cool, but it's really hard. And the amount of production that you get out of it, I'm not super familiar with, but I do know that it's a newer technology that it's a really great idea. And I think that if we can get more companies to develop that and for a lower cost, it could really help save the kind of residential grid type solar with battery straight from, having to go through these rules like P&M's net metering rules.
I don't know if there's some misunderstanding about people that are buying electric trucks or whatever. Just for that, just for use of their truck as a storage.
Yeah,
And
so
it's cheaper than buying that storage battery.
it is, yeah.
Buy a truck and have a truck too.
Yeah, definitely. It
Yeah.
can be, and the technology is moving pretty quickly,
Yeah.
like exponentially fast. So there's a lot of companies that are building this type of vehicle and then still kind of getting together the pieces to make it charge from the home and vice versa. Ford Lightning is the one that has actually made it happen so far, but others are still kind of working on the configuration.
Roger, we need you to get that truck and then you can charge the church.
You can.
I might need more than one truck.
Yeah.
There are some like contractors, for example, building new homes, they'll use the truck as a way to charge the. electric
That's
bills.
why I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
My contractor's recommending. Get a truck, you know, it's cheaper than the battery.
Yes.
Get a truck.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really cool technology. I think that there's a lot of things that need to happen for it to become a little bit more user friendly in terms of small residential homes and stuff, but it's really cool.
What's the current thinking on the payback period?
On
You invest in the solar and you're using your electric bill.
So in Santa Fe specifically, solar typically is gonna have an 8 to 12 year payback period, depending on the home and the cost of the system, of course. When you incorporate a battery, the payback period is much longer because of the cost of the battery being so high. So definitely solar on its own has a much better payback period, 8 to 12 years in Santa Fe. But when you incorporate battery, it's much longer than that.
And I just saw an article that was talking about payback periods being way shorter than that because of electric vehicles.
Mhm.
And they were factoring in the cost of gas.
Mhm.
And with the cost of gas, it was the payback period was like a year or two.
Mhm.
Really? Yeah, because you're not paying for fuel at $3.50 a gallon.
Yeah.
I electrified my house before I put in the solar. And I just dodged the bullet with the increase in natural gas prices.
Mhm.
So, you know, the day they came and took away my gas meter was the day was I was jumping up and down, because now I don't have an electric bill, I don't have a gas bill.
Yes,
Wow.
it's incredible, right? I did the same. They took the meter away and I still have the gas furnace in my house, but it just is a plant holder now. Like I don't use it at all my plants are quite happy there and I don't have to worry about the gas bill. I have no electric bill. I have these credits that have moved forward. I installed a system that's much bigger than what I needed a few years ago. Went to electric from gas and have mini splits, electric water heater, all of that, and it's just been 17.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible, right? So short-term payback is ultimately you're not going to have an electric bill anymore, with the exception of the connection fee. Long-term payback is looking at the overall savings that you're going to have, including with the rate inflations from the utility. So usually 8 to 12 years in Santa Fe. Any other questions on battery metering? Okay, and so the process right now in Santa Fe, we're looking at about a 3 to 4 month timeline. That incorporates everything. So from start to finish, 3 to 4 months. And a lot of that is kind of waiting around. So the first step is really, let's sit down and see how much solar you need. What changes are you wanting to make into the in your home in the future? Once you decide to sign up, the second step is a design survey. And this is when they get kind of more into the nitty gritty. They'll take the electrical panel face off and look at it, make sure there's no code issues. We'll look at the structural framing of the home. So we would look at the vigas if they're exposed. We would look at the framing. If it's a pitched roof, we would look into the attic and make sure that those beams are going to be structurally sound. Kind of just gather all of the information that we're going to need to make sure that the system will work for you and for your home. And then the second step, once you have a design, you go through permitting with PNM and you go through permitting with the city or the county. And that's a lot of waiting. You can see approximately 3 months. So out of the total timeline of the installation, it's really a lot of permits and stuff. When you have a church or a nonprofit or a larger organization, that becomes a lot longer. So because of historic districts, because of different grants and funding that you need to apply for, and different applications that go into it, that can be much longer for commercial projects. I mean, I think the San Miguel Church, it's been probably a year or so to get them kind of where they are. I think they're going to be installing in the next couple of weeks, which is great too. So timelines are going to vary. Residentially for homeowners, this is kind of what you can expect. And then the system, typically it's only going to take a day or two to install. But when it's installed, it's not quite turned on because they need to inspect it. They need to make sure it's not going to burn your house down, which it won't. So that's the last period of time is building and utility inspections to make sure that we did our job right. And then, once that's done, you're turned on and up and running. So it's pretty straightforward process. Us as a company take care of all of it for you, including HOA approval, historic districts. There's some homes in the historic district that, obviously have the requirements.
Yeah, just to add a little levity to this. When the utility inspector came out to inspect our installation when it was all done, he was so heavy, he could not climb the ladder. So he said, well, I trust you guys that you put it right up on the roof, and he signed off.
Sounds right.
I've heard that. Yes, ma'am.
Is your company part of the Solarized Santa Fe project?
We were this year, yeah. So there's two companies. Last year, Soluna was the only organization that did it, and then this year it was us and Soluna. We did. It was a spring program, so it's not happening anymore. But yeah, we're very happy. And
One of the things I talked to Christopher about that's kind of new as part of, and you may have mentioned this, I don't know, the San Miguel stuff. So one thing that was always difficult with churches and nonprofits is they couldn't take advantage of the tax credits because they're nonprofits, right? But what the new bill has allowed is the company that's installing the solar for those entities can now take advantage of the credit and pass it on to us. So if we wanted to get solar here at the church, then Positive Energy can take advantage of that and then pass the savings on to us, which is a new change.
yeah, I'll go into that here in a bit. So the last few slides are all about the San Miguel Church and the differences for residential, but excuse me. So the installations, when you are looking at the roof, even if it's San Miguel Church or Presbyterian Church or a home with a flat roof, there's all types of roofs, and they're going to be the same no matter what, if they're commercial or residential. So when you have a flat roof, you can see kind of in the bottom left, the solar is laying flat on the roof. It's weighted down with these cement blocks that are called ballast blocks. They are not going to penetrate the roof. So you can see the top left there. That's the design that we have for the San Miguel Church. We install pitched roofs, pitched metal roofs. If you don't have the space on the roof, we do ground mounts as well. So there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that the structural integrity of the roof is going to be sufficient for the solar, and it's not going to impact the long-term I guess, life of your roof. There are opportunities to remove the system from the roof if you need to re-roof in the future. So that's one option that we offer as a company as well. But when you have a flat roof, like I said, they're weighted down, there's no roof penetrations. When you have a pitched roof, they are attached to the structural integrity, but the weight on the roof is still so small. Regardless, though, part of our process is to go through a structural engineer, give them all the data from that design survey, give them the design and say, this is what we would like to do. And they'll look at it and approve it. And then we can move forward with it. So there's a lot that goes into making sure that this is not going to compromise your roof in any way.
We have a TPO roof. It's about 18 years old now. And the warranty is expired. It's going to have to be replaced or improved upon with silicone in the coming years. What's involved in installing panels and then moving them so that can be done 2 years from now? Who bears that cost?
So the process to the homeowner, we would come in and essentially uninstall the system, store it either at your home or on our property, and then reinstall it once the roof is complete. We would want to do it because first and foremost, we know how to do it. But the second biggest thing is that there's a warranty for the system, and the system's warranty is 30 years. So within 30 years, you're probably going to need to re-roof. But in order to avoid voiding that warranty, we would want to be the ones to do it.
In our case, we have no outdoor storage area.
Mhm.
So you take them off the roof with cranes and
We
then
would,
take them away or what?
same process of installation, we would go in, just do the reverse, remove piece by piece and store them safely on our property if you don't have the space to store them. So we would essentially disassemble it, store it and then reassemble it.
Yeah, and the panels are, I mean, how much they were, 15, 20 pounds?
Really 40 or 50.
40 pounds. So they're not super heavy though. I mean, we had a crew of 2 people moving them onto our roof. They just carry them back off and move them back on.
Yeah, exactly. So you went through the process, you know that it's pretty straightforward. You just reassemble it once your roof is done.
Because they're on those kind of girders right there, and you just take them off those, hand them out, and then take the girders off and then put them all back up and just connect them.
What's the effective life of the panel?
The length of the panel, it's the warranties for 30 years. They're gonna last for much longer than that. There's something called degradation. So when you have a solar panel, every year, just like any electronic, the amount of production it's gonna give you decreases a little bit every year. The panels that we have a 0.25%. So after 25 years, they're still going to be producing over 90% what they were when they were installed. But the technology is changing. Maybe, we want to go with a newer and better panel at some point. But this existing system you have is still producing 90%. There are companies that will relocate them to third world countries or countries where they are having a lot of natural disasters, and they'll incorporate that and to give them kind of a new life in a different way for people who need it. I think Puerto Rico has a lot of older solar panels that are being recycled, reused and recycled. Yes.
Do you recommend cleaning the panels at all? Like, do you get a lot of dust on them? The dust storm, do you?
If you live in El Dorado, I think, but
Yeah.
there's no moving parts, so there's no routine maintenance. Cleaning them off can be a good opportunity to make sure that the production is production all the time. It's not super necessary. As you can see that they're tilted. So rain and snow will help clean them off. I've never cleaned mine, but you could. It wouldn't hurt. It just is. It would be for production more than any type of maintenance or like this. Water. Just water. So they're glass. The outer layer is glass. So you just clean them like you would a window.
Yeah, we had our house stuck, so there was a lot of dust up there, and they covered the panels, but there's still some dust, and we just took a blower and just blew them off and good to go.
Yeah, and there's companies, a local company called We Do Windows will also clean solar panels. So yeah, it's not necessary, but it does make sense if you live somewhere where there's going to be debris.
Our building here is, half of it is only 16 years old and has solid structural strength. The sanctuary, however, is the biggest single room, and that is 80 years old. It consists of a very unusual roofing. There's a bunch of big light fixtures on the roof, a lot of tubing conduits feeding power to those lights. And also, I'm concerned about when we redid that roof, the city was very concerned about the appearance. It's the historical district. We had to do things like paint our electrical conduits brown. Would we do an independent engineering analysis to determine whether or not our old roof could hold this weight?
That's a great question. That's something, if we were doing the solar, we would incorporate into your process and take care of that for you, just like we did with the San Miguel Church. You can see this very old church has very old
Church in the US.
it's the oldest church in the country. So they have the same expectations. They want to make sure you can't see it. They want to make sure that it's going to be sturdy. They want to make sure that it's not going to impact the integrity of the building. All of these things that go into it would go into the same process for you. So with this historic approval, we essentially bring them a packet of information, part of that being the structural engineer's approval, and say, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan. this is how it's gonna look from the ground, this is how it's gonna look from the convention center, you know, all of these things that go into it. So if we can do it on San Miguel, I'm almost certain we can do it.
We have a,
Is that a tunnel underneath the church or what is that?
Yeah, so originally it had been restructured, I guess, so you could see that there's just a lot of old adobe and everything that kind of was original to it, but then they had to reinforce it. They added electricity at one point. There's all these things that are just kind of compounded into the building as it is now. And then you can see on the left, the roof surface is flat kind of bry material. And so when we install on that, you have a very little parapet here. So we need to make sure that we're kind of into the center as much as possible. We account for all of the things that the historic review looks for, into making sure that it can be done with their expectations met, with the structural expectations met, and also just aesthetically making sure that.
and just two more comments. Unlike that roof, we have 26 roofs on our building, separated by parapets, and now conduits to go up and over those parapets. Makes it more of a challenge. Secondly, when we did the sanctuary to accommodate our organ, our German acoustic engineers instructed us to install 8 inches of sand inside our roof structure, above the latillas. And that has added a lot of weight to the roof, the 80-year-old roof.
Yeah.
We already have a lot more weight on our roof than you would think just by looking at it.
Solar on average, when it's a flat roof, adds about 8 pounds per square foot. It's not significant, but when you have a large open space like we have with the San Miguel church, you can kind of block them all together and their combined weight holds themselves down pretty much. But when you have multiple sections of roof, those arrays can be smaller, and typically smaller means a little heavier. So that would be something that we take into account with the structural engineer. Is we have 8 inches of sand here. How is this going to impact your roof? How is it going to impact the church's longevity? Those are all things that we have to take into account.
I'm not a pickup type person, although I did consider that when the 150 was the only one offering bidirectional charging. Are you familiar with any other vehicle that's developing that capability?
I think Toyota have been looking into one. I'm not super familiar though with any that have been developed to the point of being used. I just know the Ford is the one that is the predominant one. There's also Rivian, which is doing electric trucks, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was too. I just don't know any that have become consumer ready yet.
Genevieve, big review. I think Toyota is trying to put their whole line out in like 25, 26 with all like in the whole electrified 400s and RAV4s and all of that. And they're saying that their range is gonna be like 600-700 miles compared to like the normal 300-400. So they just kind of had an announcement with the new, they brought in the Lexus head of their division, be head of all of Toyota, because the previous president had resisted some electrical stuff. And so now they've kind of changed their whole company. They're looking to put their whole line out at 25, 26 on all electric.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is your company including the SolarEdge app with your installation package?
Yeah, so SolarEdge is the string inverters. There's micro inverters, which are through Enphase, and they both include monitoring. So you can see how much your system's producing. Enphase allows you to see how much your home is using as well. And yes, that's included.
Yeah, I have it on my phone. If anyone wants to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see every day. So I do want to point out this photo shows you and as you know, if you have solar, there's additional equipment that goes on the side of the home. It's not just the solar that's on the roof. There's a little bit of equipment that goes on the outside as well. There's 2 meters here, and this is what Cece was talking about. One goes one way and the other goes the other way. So this is how you can see your production. The box right below it is a main emergency disconnect. So in the event of an emergency, the system can be completely shut off from the rest of your home. So there's protection there. And then that larger box on the right, that's the combiner panel where all the lines come together and then are fed into the house. And that's where the monitoring is also. Okay, yes.
I'm remembering the movie, I think it was called The Martian,
Uh-huh.
where the poor guy had to travel to get picked up across the surface of Mars. And he had to set up solar panels every night to charge
Uh-huh.
them during the day and then
Yep,
power them back on.
yep.
It's cute.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So I know that you guys have a larger footprint for this church, but San Miguel Mission is a pretty small electrical footprint. So what this is showing you is that we have a small 20 panel system going on the San Miguel church over there. And so it doesn't necessarily matter how big of an impact or footprint you have, you can still make a difference with 20 panels or 200 panels. Still, it's going to be a significant offset.
Genevieve, one of the strategies we're trying to take with our energy audit is to kind of reduce use, right? You know, like lighting changes, HVAC stuff. Try to, get a floor of kind of here's, if we make these energy changes, here's kind of what we're looking at, right? And then figure out how many panels do you use from that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good approach for anyone looking into solar, a homeowner, a church, a commercial property. Reduction is the best thing that you can do prior to offsetting by solar. It's just reducing in general. I mean, it's going to be a better approach than using a lot more, but then offsetting it, solar. I think that it's a good approach.
It's a challenge in our culture because I think people just think, oh, put solar on and I'll use as much as I want. I'm like, no, you want to reduce and then, buy less panels. And
Yeah.
Be smart with your energy, right?
Yeah. So the tax credits that we talked about, we'll go over real quick. So the difference between residential tax credits and tax credits for congregation, churches, nonprofits, things like that. Just like you said, it's direct pay. So tax exempt entities in the past hadn't been able to benefit from these tax credits because they had no tax liability. So now instead of limiting organizations in that way, the Inflation Reduction Act allows a direct pay. So they're assuming you have a tax liability and you just are now going to be paid back or reimbursed for the costs for the solar. So it's brand new with the Inflation Reduction Act this past year. It's also going for the next 10 years. So the way that it works is you install solar in 2023. You pre-register with the IRS, letting them know that you're installing, and then they will make sure when you go to do your taxes and you file your taxes, you will get a reimbursement, like a direct payment check for that. So this is new, and this is what's kind of sparked a lot of the interest with nonprofits and organizations interested in offsetting with solar, is this opportunity that they didn't have before. Along with people, like yourself that are interested in spreading the word about the impact that it has on the community and the larger scale neighborhoods and cities and just overall impact on the environment, which we all know is.
So San Miguel is taking advantage of that.
Yes, yes. So there's those photos again. They specifically, with a smaller system, are offsetting, 162,000 pounds of coal that's not being burned, 156,000 gallons of water saved, an average of 34 vehicles not driving on the road. And this is just one small system. So it's definitely not necessarily about just the personal impact, but the larger collective impact that this could have. If 200 systems of 20 panels were installed, this would be just astronomically impactful for the community. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
The power here is pretty reliable, so it's probably not a factor. Can you talk a little bit about island capability?
Islanding?
Yeah.
Islanding is so islanding is essentially when there is a grid outage and there's an electrical source that's still providing electricity to the grid, even though the rest of the grid is out. So there's a code called anti-islanding that makes it so there's no risk of people getting injured when working on the grid if there were to be an outage. So batteries are what help alleviate that code necessity. So without batteries, your solar system has to shut down in the event of a grid outage. The amount of power is so big that it could be really detrimental to somebody's health if they're working on the grid and the solar is still connected. So code requires it to be shut down. Batteries allow you to use it because it cuts the home off from the grid and continues to provide power through the battery. So it does give you that security. Without batteries, you wouldn't be able to have power. Grid outage.
Can your island without a battery, so you just have power during the day?
Not to my knowledge.
Are you seeing people having more fears of fires and things like that using batteries, and that why people are doing it, or what are the concerns?
I think the concerns of fire are valid. It's such a rarity, but you see it in the news and you see it in it's like the 1 out of every 100,000 installations that this has happened to. Part of the code also requires batteries to be installed in a space that's not considered lived in. So a shed or a garage typically is where you're going to install a battery because of that safety in the fire code. So there are some insecurities around it because of that, but it's not a significant risk to the point where it would impact the larger perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.